Welcome back to WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. I'm Andrew J. Shasha, supervising editor here at the Western Journal. I'm joined today on my left by reporter Michael Austin. Some might call him the crack reporter at the Western Journal. I'm joined on my right by assignment editor Olivia Brown. Excellent, guys. We've got an awesome episode for you today at home. We're going to be talking about, it would appear some U.S. intel might show that the Wuhan lab conspiracy theory that many of us have kind of spoken about at length on Twitter, behind the scenes, and even on episodes here, might not be as much of a conspiracy theory as the left would like you to believe.
Surprise!
Surprise. Big surprise. No one would have seen that coming a year and a half ago. We're going to be speaking about free speech overseas and on social media. And we're going to be speaking first, however, about amnesty. I'm going to kick it off here with that topic. So over the last couple of weeks, actually over the last couple of months, immigration has been a huge hot-button issue since Biden took office in January. We have seen just absolutely constant discussion about this topic, the way that he has handled it with his executive orders, pulling these Trump orders back and just kind of letting folks walk right across the border. We've seen a massive influx, a crisis at the border. And something that we wanted to dig into here at the Western Journal was we looked back and we wanted to speak to some immigration experts, and we wanted to see not only where this crisis came from, we've covered that in the past, we wanted to get at the heart of why is the word amnesty so pervasive in the political landscape in the United States? Why does this topic come around once every 5 to 10 years, every decade at least? It is a hot button key term. It's a Rorschach test. We see which politicians are for which reforms a lot of the time based on this term. It might be the dirtiest word in American politics. What Americans might not know about that dirty word is that it actually kind of got its start in the Reagan administration, surprisingly enough. President Ronald Reagan, initially coming into office, was not hot on the trail of immigration, but knew that there was a problem. Previous administrations, particularly the Eisenhower administration and the Carter administration, had started opening up commissions in Congress and in the executive to kind of seek out how many illegal immigrants were in the country, what were the effects. They found it, depressing wages, these crossings at the southern border. They found that it was having a tremendous impact on the cultural fabric in the American South and the Southwest. And so Reagan came into office not particularly seeking out the immigration issue, but by his second term, it was hot enough and it was important enough to him that he wanted to tackle it. He wanted to say, let's get this under control. As we know, the Reagan Revolution was a massive part of the American culture at the time. Deeply optimistic character, a Hollywood star and a governor of California. He came in with optimism. He changed the cultural landscape. And part of that was looking back on the history and saying, oh, well, American history is immigration. There was the Ellis Island era. There was, the settling of the American West. And before that, the settling of the colonies. And so we dug back. We spoke last week. I spoke with Mark Krikorian at the Centers for Immigration Studies. We've had a great relationship with them in recent months as we've reported on this topic. And we essentially found that it sort of seems, and you guys can check this report out, it just dropped this morning, if you want more details on the immense history behind the kind of the creation of amnesty in the American immigration conversation, how we got here. But something that Mark Krikorian told me was that, it wasn't necessarily Reagan's fault, but his optimism, his enthusiasm was taken advantage of at the end of the day. During this period, in 1986, we were talking about a major immigration reform bill. And Reagan said, we do need to shore up the borders, we do need to shore up the immigration system, but we need to have a big old door so that anyone who enjoys freedom, anyone who wants freedom can enter. Part of that, of course, trying to juxtapose the United States with the USSR at the time, the Soviets, the communists. America wanted to seem as free as possible. So the deal that got struck in Congress was that there was going to be a shoring up of the border, and there was primarily going to be sanctions on employers. They were going to be fined tremendously for hiring illegal immigrants. In exchange, there would be an amnesty for anyone who entered the country before 1982. So once that bill passed, it passed overwhelmingly. About 2.7 million folks amnestied into the U.S. population, given their green cards and an opportunity at citizenship. Unfortunately, within a year, senators and congresspeople on both sides of the aisle, prominent names, folks like Ted Kennedy, the Lion of the Senate from Massachusetts, John McCain, started trying to pull back these sanctions and allow for American businesses to hire illegal immigrants. Obviously, a lot of the politicians in Washington, we know this, we talk about this in the pockets of big business, always looking for a freer market, nothing wrong with that per se, but open up the borders and they take back their part of the bargain. And of course, ever since, every 10 or so years, we see, you know, more people come into the United States illegally. That grand bargain that was pursued by the Reagan administration was broken, and now we just see a reiteration. Every 10 or so years, we talk immigration reform, and amnesty is always on the table. What I want to ask you before we get into that conversation, however, is does this change the way that we view the Reagan administration?
To me, no. What it changes is, being from Arizona, what stuck out to me is that John McCain was one of these people that moved towards breaking, like, I understand the amnesty, you know, everybody from 1982. But to go on and then later break that, I attribute that more to John McCain than Ronald Reagan.
Does this change the way we look at Reagan? It shouldn't. I think for a lot of reactionaries on the right today, it probably does, because there's a big misunderstanding about immigration when it comes to conservatism. And immigration, lots of immigration, is a great thing. It's really good, and that's what Reagan was saying. But if you do that, you can't have all this welfare stuff going on. You can't have people hiring, you know, illegal immigrants. And, you know, that's just kind of the tragedy of the story you put out, is that, you know, this could have been a great thing for America. It could have been a great thing for the free market. But unfortunately, you know, too many people took advantage of the situation. And, you know, when you have, you know, more open borders and less secure borders, that's just a recipe for disaster.
No, absolutely. I would have to agree with both of you. You can't see an administration that had an optimistic hope for the United States. You can't tread on them for essentially hoping for the best. At this time, at least, we talked about this a couple weeks ago on the show. You know, Democrats and Republicans kind of saw the United States at least semi-similarly. There were foundations that we agreed upon, even if there were policy differences. We saw that with folks like JFK. Of course, this is kind of the moment where Democrats started deciding we're going to break every bargain that we make with the Republicans. We're going to start going our own way. We're going to start seeing America completely differently. And since then, it's only gotten worse. So something that Krikorian also said to us in our interview as we discussed this topic was that, yes, it was an optimistic hope. He was taken advantage of. But going forward, and it's good that we saw in 2008, for instance, that, you know, folks on the wings put down immigration reform that was based too heavily in amnesty and not heavily enough in border security. Krikorian had a fantastic quote. He said, "You've got to fix the problem before you amnesty people." The problem is that Democrats have finally figured out, okay, maybe we'll do a piecemeal amnesty, but still reject the idea that there should be any trade-off or balance to these bills. So I'm not sure what we will do with them. He went on to say that essentially the Democrats are going to possibly need to be humiliated a couple more times on the topic of immigration before they come to the table in good faith. He did, however, go on to say that, you know, an amnesty might be the way to go. Eventually, you know, you've got 11 to the Yale study a couple years ago, 22 million people in this country illegally. It's not good for the social fabric. It's not good for business to have that many undocumented individuals, just an invisible population, as they call it in the criminal justice field, just kind of milling about, not known, and incorporating into their communities less strongly as a result. What I want to ask
my question is, now when you bring that up, these undocumented people, them just being in our society, the way you're saying is that they should be granted amnesty.
Not necessarily.
But what I'm thinking is, why not deport them for being illegal in the first place?
I would stand with you on that 9 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10. My heart wants to say, I guess pragmatically, my mind wants to say, these folks broke the law. They broke the law. They entered the country illegally, and they cut in line in front of a lot of people who were qualified, who waited their turn, who paid their bills trying to get into this country. That's deeply wrong. Unfortunately, when we're talking about 11 to 22 million people, we're talking about a massive population. We're talking about at least almost 1% of the American population. We're getting to substantial numbers here. There are folks who have laid down roots who have had multiple generations. Those folks, I would say, some of them might have to get amnestied. I would probably wager that devil's bargain there. But I would have to agree with Krikorian, and that's what I want to ask you guys is amnesty an acceptable term of an agreement like this if we can actually get that once only great bargain that was discussed at that time, if we can actually get the other side to agree to uphold border control, to uphold our system of laws, if we can actually nail that down and ensure that it's not scrapped the moment the amnesty goes through, is that a worthwhile trade?
I mean, Olivia's right. The place we want to get to is if you come over illegally, you are deported. You committed a crime, you're gone.
No doubt about it.
Obviously, where we are now, we need to be able to transition to that point. We can't just immediately rip everyone out of the economy and then just replace it instantly with legal immigrants. That's just not going to work. But yeah, I think a way that we can get here practically is Republicans need to be campaigning more on how we will give you more immigration. We will let way more people in, but only if the Democrats secure the border. Yes. If we kept harping on that point, I think we could actually make some more progress versus right now, it seems like a lot of Republicans are just like, oh no immigration. Less immigration bad, and let's just be the antithesis of the Democrats. When there's a better position where we can kind of make them the bad guy for once. So, yeah.
Yeah, my problem is are we able to trust the Democrats after time over and over and over again? We're seeing just like you said in 1982, in 1986.
86.
And look where we are now. I don't know if we can trust them, but I'd love to get to a place where we can, in an idealistic world where Republicans and Democrats can work together. That is the end goal, but is it realistic?
And that's unfortunately the problem that we're kind of facing right now, is that not only do we not agree on policy items, we don't agree on what should be done to solve the problems, we don't agree on the underlying problems. The Democrats, the left, deny, if it's not their problem, if it's not the problem that they want to discuss, it's out. It's a conspiracy theory. It's a lie. It's nonsense. And that's kind of where we're at with the Democratic Party and with the left in this country. With that, I don't know how you bargain with them.
Yes, and there's another, and they love using the whole conspiracy theory angle to just anything they don't want to debate. And we saw that with COVID, the coronavirus, when we all wanted to know, okay, where did this thing come from? What caused it? It just so happens that in Wuhan, the origin of the virus in China, in Wuhan, China, there was a lab where they were testing dangerous diseases. And so that led a lot of people to say, oh, well, it's probably a good chance it came from that lab. And, Trump came out pretty early on in the pandemic and said, yeah, we believe it came from that lab. And of course, everybody on the left called him racist. Everybody, how dare you question China? How dare you blame it on the Chinese people? When really he's blaming it on the Chinese government. Yeah, but they conflate those two things all the time. But, Trump suggested this. Oh, no, you're crazy. So many people have suggested this may be the case since then, and they were all called crazy or racist or conspiracy theorists. And now everybody on the left is just starting to change their tune just a little bit because, as it turns out, Trump was actually working with some pretty good intel that now has been released. Now the public, now we know what it says. And basically the report says that 3 researchers at that Wuhan Institute of Virology in China were sick in November of 2019. They were so sick that they had to go to the hospital, which suggests that they all got COVID, went to the hospital in November. So it is insane because, we've seen Fauci, he was telling people that it's crazy. How dare you suggest it came? There's no evidence to suggest it came from there. The WHO, who of course worked alongside the CCP, worked alongside the Communist Party of China, and said, "Oh yeah, no, from everything we've seen, it didn't come from China."
I'm sure, as long as China is conducting all the investigations, that's going to be the case.
The same WHO that ignored intel from Taiwan, I believe, who told
Taiwan's
them
not
that
a country. So
yeah, they don't. certainly the WHO won't tell you it is. But all these people, even the Washington Post early on, they put out a fact check saying that we have no evidence that this virus came from a lab. It must have come naturally from an animal or something like that. And now they're all changing their tunes. The Washington Post, Fauci came out and said, oh, yeah, it definitely could have come from that lab now. And so Everybody's changing
Eating
their
their
tunes.
words.
Yes, and what is so troubling about this is that this entire public health establishment that we've all been told, these are the experts, these are the people we have to listen to. They told us we were all crazy. They told us we were conspiracy theorists, and now yet again, they flip-flopped on masks. They flip-flopped on how the disease spreads, and now they've flip-flopped on the cause. And what do you guys think this says about do you think that that the establishment will hold on to kind of its credibility and power? Because, there are a lot of people on the left, there's a lot of people in, government that are still going to stand by these people, but it's clear that they have no idea what they're talking about. It can change on a whim. What's going to happen from here with the kind of public health, all these establishment experts?
Just for me, seeing since they were changing all the different things on how it could be transferred, whether pets could get it. I remember all these different scenarios that were going around. And I personally remember being so glad when President Trump defunded the World Health Organization for doing that. But Biden brought it back. So that's important to know.
Very good point.
But I definitely have lost faith a lot in the CDC since then, just with seeing the changes in masks, all those different sorts of things. This is just another thing on the trail of what they flip-flopped on.
And Andrew, we know they're full of, BS. We know they don't know what they're talking about. But what worries me is that we all know this, and yet they're still going to hold all that power. They're still going to be able to tell people what to do. The CDC is still going to be able to enact all these different, restrictions on people through law that they should have no right doing. Do you think that eventually, time after time, them getting it wrong, is that going to take away their power?
I mean, I want to say so, but because if we've learned anything during the course of this pandemic, this 1.5 year long, war path that they have gone on, is that people are self-interested and they want as much authority as they can get. Yeah. These people wanted to be heard so badly that they were willing to get in bed with the media narrative. They were willing to get in bed with Democratic politicians who seemed more powerful against Trump than Trump was himself. Yeah. He was, kind of the odd man on the island, and everyone was looking at him and berating him. So if it's going to get me heard as a scientist, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to get on board with the powerful guys and I'm going to say what I want to say, and hopefully I get listened to in some way. That makes them deeply untrustworthy. And when you have a deeply untrustworthy person who then goes on the warpath against you personally, it's like I feel personally attacked with this it's a conspiracy theory nonsense. It's like, yes, of course, the people who say it was a biological weapon that was unleashed by the Chinese on their own people to eventually get to America, I don't buy it. But it is absolutely not a conspiracy theory to raise the question that maybe someone made a mistake. It's not like Chernobyl was a nuclear bomb that went off in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union made a mistake, a deeply costly mistake that, poured radiation into the atmosphere, that destroyed local groundwater and left a major portion in the Ukraine uninhabitable. Right. Yeah. There's no question to me that it could be a mistake, and to ask that it be investigated and to be put down under the thumb of the government and told, you're an idiot, you don't know what's good for you, shut up. It's like you now have an untrustworthy authority that has personally attacked me. And it's not necessarily whether I think that they'll be taken out of the official bureaucratic power that they've been given. It's whether I think the people of the United States are going to give them the social authority that they so desperately crave. And I don't see how they could, because someone like me, who would have been on the side of the scientists, the experts at the beginning of this, is sick to death of it.
And I would say, before we move on to the last point here, there is a middle ground with that kind of conspiracy theory about China using it as a biological weapon. And that is, the active cover-up, actively misleading other countries. They knew the damage it was going to do to everyone. They knew that damage could have been minimized, and yet they let all of that happen. So, it's interesting to sparse that out. There are some conspiracy theorists that'll say, oh, yeah, they were launching an attack. But, the way Trump talked about it, he used some of that similar terminology, and he was definitely talking about the fact that they covered it up, they let it all happen. But
there's also the idea of, if I'm going to go down, I'm going to take you with me. And it's like, China doesn't want to look stupid on the world stage. World powers hate looking stupid. We saw that with the USSR. So when you have China with this massive economy-breaking virus breaking out, it's like, who cares if
Yeah.
it gets out to other countries? At least it'll hurt their economies too. It levels the playing field essentially for a year.
Yeah, and another troubling part about this whole narrative about this Wuhan lab, the new information that just came out. I haven't seen many people reporting on this, but back in September, Twitter suspended a Chinese virologist who said that COVID-19 was made in the Wuhan lab. Now, just think about that. Twitter suspended someone from their platform who was actually telling something that is probably true of worldwide importance, that this virus probably started in a lab. That's something we all need to know. And Twitter just shut that person out of the public forum because, that's what social media is right now. And that brings us into this discussion about, all the protections that these social media companies have. Section 230. And, Twitter, it has the protections of a platform, and yet this is a publisher. If you are banning people for sharing certain information you don't like, that just so happens to be true, by the way, that you're a publisher. And the fact that these companies now, so if Facebook, Twitter, and like Instagram, and I don't know, one other place, if they all shut people out from saying one specific thing, the truth is gone. And like there's nothing we can do about it. So, what I think this shows is that we need to take these protections away. What do you think, Olivia?
Yeah, I think that it's very important for people to be able to speak out and say what is important, be able to speak out against the government, have questions. It's deeply American for us to have questions, bring them up, and be able to share them on the public forum. And it's a major problem if Twitter is stopping people from sharing those opinions.
I'd take it a step further, Michael. You say, oh, well, this person was punished for sharing something that might have been true. I don't care if it was something that might have been false.
Right.
They should be allowed to
Right.
say it. There are no laws against lying. There are no laws against, unless it's in a legal case, there's no reason to say that, people shouldn't be allowed the same platform to get up there and make fools of themselves.
Yeah.
I would tend to believe, I would hope to believe that the average person has the mental faculties to hear a lie and to hear the truth and to figure it out for themselves. And I think that the majority of people, educated folks, good, freedom-loving Americans, are going to decide what is right for them and their families. So whether it's a lie that's getting out there, it's like, okay, well, we can discern that. We don't need the government to be the discerning one because the government believes that there are 64 genders. Yeah. I don't.
And that's why I guess the importance of this is not necessarily saying that like, oh yeah, Twitter needs to allow people to talk, but it's just saying when they operate in the way they do, when it's, the scientific consensus, when it's, the experts get to say what's right, and then we censor people based on that.
It's a publisher.
It is a publisher. It needs to be regulated, but also it's these sorts of truths that are going to inevitably someday, they're going to get shut out. And, someday it's going to be something that we all need to know.
Yes.
And social media companies will just silence it from forever from anybody seeing. And this is not the only recent example we have of Twitter basically just blacking out someone. So.
Yeah. So today I'm going to be talking about the real life Jason Bourne and everything that's been happening with him. So there is this journalist from Belarus named Roman Protovich. And excuse me if I don't say all the Russian names correctly. I am not Russian, so I'm probably not going to, I'm going to butcher it.
Yeah.
But I'll try to say them as good as I can. So it's been very, very interesting. This is what happens to a country when they don't have free speech, when they have a dictator. This is an East European country called Belarus, and it is one of the last countries that really they call the last European dictator is this guy named Lushenko. And so with Protovich, he was speaking out against the government, protesting things that were happening there. And this is what's scary if this happens in America, he now faces the death penalty because he's been labeled as a terrorist. So it's very, very interesting, brings up all these questions as if it was going to happen in America. But what's important and why this was recently in the news and was trending on Twitter, ironically, is that on Sunday, Protovich was on a plane. He had fled Belarus in 2019 after being labeled a terrorist for this, and he got away. However, he was on another flight that flew right nearby Belarusia, and so they had a MiG-29 fighter jet bring down a commercial flight with 170 other passengers on it.
gosh.
Can you imagine all of a sudden there's
Vacation ruined.
they were on the border of Lithuania and Belarusia, and then they are emergency brought down because of him being on this flight. So this is what our Secretary of State had to say, if you pull up the tweet. So he said, "We strongly condemn Lushenko's regime, brazen and shocking act to divert a commercial flight and arrest a journalist. We demand an international investigation and are coordinating with our partners on the next steps. The United States stands with the people of Belarus." I think it's very good that the American have come out against this. But, my question is, as we're seeing things just like Twitter banning that person saying that,
Right.
how far is it before we lose our freedom of speech? That's why it's so important being in America where we have the First Amendment.
Well, I mean, I think we're already past the threshold in terms of these forms of social media. Like we don't have freedom of speech. Like if Twitter sees any of my tweets that refers to transgender people by their biological pronouns, I'm off. Like good thing I'm not famous and nobody knows who I am, because that keeps me on the platform. But as soon as that happens, I'm gone. So I don't have absolute freedom of speech in that instance. So
No, you absolutely don't. And I would always raise I tend to raise the, it's their platform. They can do what they want. I would agree with Michael when it comes to, if you're violating Section 230, if you're acting as a publisher,
yes,
that's a problem. Those protections need to be stripped. I've spoken endlessly about antitrust. I think that these trusts need to be broken up in Silicon Valley. But at the end of the day, it is deeply concerning that people don't recognize it, or at least look. There's a massive swath of the population here in the States that doesn't look at that and see at least a concern, because whether I think that it's within their rights as a platform to do things like, ban speakers, I at least look at it and I say, maybe we shouldn't be acting that way. Maybe we shouldn't be silencing speech. And when we look at these other countries, we even look at Canada and Britain, and we say, oh, well, they have freedom of speech. It's very different in the United States when we have it enshrined. We have it in the First Amendment, in our Constitution, as, philosophically, I hate to get philosophical on the show, but philosophically, it's a God-given right. You look at it and you say, that's a right that pre-exists government, whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Muslim, whether you're an atheist. It's a right that pre-exists the government, and the government can't be infringing upon it. These places, by and large, don't have those rights. They don't have, and so when people say, "Oh, you're being sensationalist," to look at these countries and say, "This is what happens when you don't have freedom of speech," well, they do. They can say what they want. It's just not in their Constitution. It's like, well, if it's not there, you don't have it, and that's a problem for people. That's a really dangerous thing, because we may be 100 years away from death penalty for someone who speaks out against the state, but it's something to consider. We have people like Edward Snowden still on the run in Russia for releasing,
That's true.
papers from the government. That's seriously concerning.
Yeah, that's true. And it's interesting. This was just in the news last week about how Prince Harry was talking about how he read the First Amendment and it was confusing to him. Yeah, I know.
Surprise.
I think he called it crazy, didn't he?
Almost like he fought a war against them for a reason.
Exactly. So I have a couple more interesting tweets here. This is the next one. This is from, it's translated from Russian for you guys. But here is when he tweets in November of 2020. This is right before he fled, or right after. He said, "I'm officially recognized as a terrorist. Yes, this is not a joke. The KGB of Belarus put me on the list of terrorists. Now my name is on the same list as guys from ISIS." That is chilling to know when a journalist speaks out. And what he's being charged with is inciting public disorder and social hatred.
Oh, wonderful.
Now, what exactly is social hatred? I don't know. It's defined by the dictator of Belarus. But because he's been put on this terrorist list, he can also face the death penalty. And so now he's been captured. On Sunday, he was captured, so we don't know what the fate of Roman will be. Another interesting part of this is originally my story for the podcast was just to talk about this, how he's the real life Jason Bourne. However, when I looked into it more, I noticed that Twitter had made all of his content sensitive. So if you could show this screenshot, this is what happens when you pull up his page. It says this profile may be potentially sensitive content. And so Twitter is just like the KGB censoring him for his speaking. And let me show you exactly what they're censoring him for. So this is the screenshot in Russian. You can see that it's settings say it's sensitive content. But then when you click on it, this next one, this is what it is. It's a photo shoot of a lady. This is sensitive content to Twitter. This is concerning to me that this is marked as sensitive content when it is very obvious when he says it was insanely cool to have such an experience. As a photographer, that's marked as sensitive. That is concerning. That is something we should be talking about more on freedom of speech here and just in addition to this entire story.
Yeah.
Particularly when we have, you know, big tech. It seems to me in this instance that's big tech taking its lead from, you know, the Belarusian government. That's looking at it and seeing that. And
from a dictator.
Yes, and that's worse. Because in the United States, we have a no-fly list. We have folks who get put on that no-fly list wrongly all the time.
Yes.
We had the January 6th incident where companies immediately started tracking cell phones for the government so that you could see and arrest people who weren't even inside the Capitol on the day of the riot. Now, again, not good to be, you know, inciting an insurrection on the Capitol.
Yeah.
But we have companies partnering with the government, and I hate to go on a libertarian rambling.
Yeah.
Joe might be proud. Oh my goodness, I'm in a concerning place right now. But when we have companies partnering with the government to say these are the untouchables over here that have weird ideas, and we're going to track them, and we're going to make everyone turn on them, that's a problem.
Yeah,
and you know, another troubling thing that kind of brings up, just to put a quick pin on it, is Twitter. You know, they're fully willing to censor us, all the weird groups, you know, in America that they deem to be not so great. But when it comes to, you know, communist dictatorships like China and, you know, Belarus and Iran, they let those guys say whatever they want. You know, they let
Palestinians.
They let the leader of the terrorist organization Hamas say, "Oh my gosh, it's so awesome that we're killing so many Israelis."
Yes.
Like, now they did take down his tweets, but he only got taken off the platform for like a week, and then he was back on.
Yeah.
And you know, Iran can say whatever it wants. You know, China gets to put out all this propaganda.
we see President Trump permanently
still gone.
banned.
Yes, and
permanently
Trump is
banned.
still gone.
Yeah.
No, it's insane. Clearly, we have a problem in the world, in the United States. That's kind of goes without saying. As a Christian conservative publisher, we would be arguing from that point of view daily. Fortunately for you guys, we're always going to be here giving you guys the updates, the live updates, and the updates on our website. Again, this is a Western Journal here, WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. I'm sorry. We're here giving these live updates, talking through the news, talking through the most pressing issues facing the nation and the world every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. I got it right this time, but I was looking at my notes, so I was kind of cheating. But I'll still take the point over George. That's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific for WJ Live. If you want to follow us, go to YouTube, hit that red subscribe button on our channel. That's going to be, you know, youtube.com/WJ Live. Hit subscribe. A bell is going to pop up next to it. You're going to want to hit the bell too. I know that's an extra step. I know it's a little bit weird. I think it's kind of weird too. But the problem is that if you just subscribe, YouTube's probably still going to throttle how much content you get from us when we go live. If you hit that bell, you're going to get an update no matter what. Every time we go live, we're not going to get shadow banned. We're not going to get kept out of your email subscribers list. So make sure you're subscribing, hitting the bell. Go to westernjournal.com/newsletters. Sign up for our newsletter. You'll see when we do our rundowns of this show, when we do all of our news publishing. A lot of the stories we talk about here are stories that were published on the website first. So if you want an in-depth look, go to the website. Or if you want to follow up and you want to get it, you want to dig deeper after we discuss it, head over there. Finally, if you want to go to westernjournal.com/join, you can support all the work we do here at the Western Journal.
Yes.
You can support all of our in-depth reporting, our video team, who has done a great job producing this show. You can support everybody here. It's not lining our pockets, but it's going to the journalism. So we've got subscriber tiers up. This week is going to be the first week where we're putting out subscriber-only paywalled content. So you're going to want to get in on that, westernjournal.com/join. That's it for me here at the Western Journal. That's it for us here at the Western Journal. Thanks for watching. Josh, did you hear? They're putting the Libertarian back on the podcast.
No.
Oh? You didn't see the calendar?
No.
You should talk to Kayla about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, who's on the show Tuesday?
You and Joe.
Yeah. Like he's back.
Yeah, no, you and Joe. You
The
should
Libertarian?
Yeah, Libertarian Joe.
He's not back.
You should just go in the studio and check it out.
You're messing with me.
Okay.
Okay. Nice joke, Kayla. Got me to go to the studio.
Oh.
No!